Hello and welcome to another D&D Stories. I'm your host, TheWriter, and this is the show where we sit here in front of a shelf full of gaming stuff and I tell you all my D&D and tabletop gaming stories. And we return once more to the campaign of Zombie Town, which has of course been very popular because, sex sells and the 18 plus rating certainly draws quite a few more clicks than normal. Don't think I haven't noticed, you dirty bastards. And if you recall, last time Jessica locked up a pedophile and he got taken away, so her temptation as a paladin of Gunther was well in hand for her, and she did not fall. So we move on to our next paladin, Big Ben, this time around. Our chunky salsa fight loving, little bit bloodthirsty, little bit gold greedy kind of guy. We're gonna see if he falls or not. So place your bets. Again, how many paladins are we gonna have left by the time this campaign is over? Today is Big Ben's chance to shine or to crack under the weight of temptation. So, which do you think it will be? Now, we rejoin our heroes some days later. I gave them some days of downtime as promised, and they did some shopping, they did some resting, they did plenty of talking with other NPCs just to kind of get a handle on what's going on and how far into the mission that they are, because the town, they've kind of, by this point, all the different cells of paladins have kind of swept the town. They've visited most of the buildings, and out of the 20,000 or so people that were living in this town, they've saved about 280, almost 300 people. So not a good survival rating, but they're peasants, so they don't know how to fight a zombie plague, but they've rescued almost 300 people, which isn't bad. And if you recall, our group of paladins rescued, 7 children, their matron, and then a small group of other people, and then along the way they've picked up, one person here and one person there. Still no sign of the so-called Stitcher, the guy that started this plague and left the undead abomination running around the graveyard by the church. And they have yet to find any more clues about him. They're starting to wonder if maybe he was just a puppeteer working in the background and they're not going to see him. Well, we'll see. But we start this session by Lord Minor calling Big Ben in for a meeting. Isn't that how this always goes? And Big Ben is very, very suspicious. But he does go in on his own as requested, and he tells his friends to wait for him. And Lord Minor's there behind his desk, and he's still got the maid in the corner and all the books and the fancy paper all over his desk. And he goes, Big Ben, Sir Paladin, I understand that we are almost done searching for survivors. Is that true? And Ben's like, yeah, it is, Lord Minor. I think we're going to go for one more sweep, and then they're going to start, launching the powder kegs and the alchemist fire onto all the buildings to just burn the place to the ground. If we found all the innocent people we can, it's time to start cleansing the land and, freezing the river, burning the buildings, leave no stone on top of another. The paladins of Gunther are going to annihilate this town so that the disease, the plague, doesn't spread. This is them burning and salting the fields, basically, to make sure that nothing, dead or alive, gets out with this plague in their bodies so that the rest of the countryside doesn't have to worry. He said, how many people have you rescued? He's like, almost 300, Lord Minor. Isn't that great? And he goes, yeah. And Big Ben hasn't had a huge problem with Lord Minor yet. I mean, he thinks he's an asshole, but, as a paladin, he understands this guy is just really rich and he can just kind of be a douchebag. And Big Ben's priorities are always unto, find monsters to kill and get lots of loot. So his primary weakness is the silver coin, the septum, the gold piece, whatever, the frog skins, the dineros, etc., etc. And one of his goals as a D&D player was to buy or find an item that was worth like 100,000 gold or something like that. He wanted to buy like a staff of 7 parts or a rod of wonder or something, even though there's no merchant in the world that would have those items. But Lord Minor's been around long enough to know somebody to know if his weakness might be money. And he goes, well, Master Paladin, have you guys searched through the town as far as like artifacts, things that can't be replaced, records and things like that? And Big Ben looks at me and goes, did we do that? And I go, yeah, there were several cells of paladins that went to the Hall of Records and cleaned out what they could, and original holy book texts and magic, anything like magic that was in the town. They tried to recover what they could and then cleanse it all in holy fire, in healing spells, and dip it in a cauldron full of cure disease potion, etc., to recover things that were not replaceable. Like if you're going to have a house fire or something, you would put stuff in a safe. And he says, well, I've been looking through all the inventories of things that they found, and they've missed the most powerful artifact in the entire town. It's not here yet. I don't want them to blow up the town without recovering this artifact. And Big Ben, he is intrigued. He goes, what is that? And he says, it's a jeweled cross from the local, I forget the name of the local farming god, whatever you want to call that. It's like a sun god that would help the crops grow, etc. Very simple sub-religion for the simple pheasant folk. And it was basically like a big jeweled cross with a golden sun with a face on it, and it was covered with rubies and emeralds and diamonds and stuff like that, but it was like big enough to be like a staff or like a two-handed bow weapon. It was just made of gold and jewels. So like hierophants and all the rest would carry it around, but it was only brought out for ceremony. And since a lot of people flocked to the church when the zombie plague started, and there were so many zombies in the graveyard near the church, that didn't last very long. So the hierophant probably got chewed up, and that staff or cross was lost. So they haven't found it yet. And whether it's buried among all the dead bodies, or if it's in a lower crypt somewhere, or if the Hierophant is still alive hiding in the lower catacombs, they don't know. They haven't found the Hierophant, and they haven't found the jeweled cross of whatever god it was. I'm just going to say the harvest god. They haven't found the jeweled cross of the harvest god yet. And Big Ben's like, really? And Lord Minor goes, yeah. It'd be an awful shame if the town got blown up and, burned to the ground, and all the catacombs and tunnels and stuff were collapsed, and you didn't have the jeweled cross of the harvest god, recovered from the town. Surely that would give people hope that their lives can continue on after this town has been destroyed. I mean, surely it's just going to become a pile of rubble after this, and no one will want to go there for years. You should probably recover it for them, or better yet, bring it to me, and I'll set it up in the middle of the courtyard as like a shining beacon, a symbol of hope. And I know you're paladins of Gunther, and harvest gods are not exactly your forte, but it will give the people hope, and they do need your help, don't they? And he goes, yeah. And then he stops for a second because he knows Lord Minor doesn't move if money or sex or something else isn't involved. And he goes, what's in it for you, Lord Minor, telling me about all this? And Lord Minor turns and he gestures to his maid dressed in purple. And she comes over. She's got like the French maid's outfit on. She's, her boobs are practically hanging out. She's got the bonnet on her head, etc., etc. And I think her name was like Melody or Valerie or something like that. Some pretty feminine name. And he goes, this is Melody. and her contract of employment is inside the shaft of the jeweled cross of the harvest god. And he goes, why? And he looks over at Melody, who of course says nothing. She keeps her head down, very submissive, very quiet. And he goes, Melody, unfortunately, has a contract with a contract devil. And he goes, what? A contract devil? And a contract devil is, making a deal with the devil. He has to write it down and put it on a scroll, and then he gets a copy, you get a copy, etc., etc. Usually for your immortal soul. Unless, of course, both copies of that scroll are out of that devil's hands, which is not easy to do, but can be done. And he goes, yes, if that contract was destroyed, that devil might be able to come for her whenever he wants. And he goes, woman, what deal did you make that you sold your immortal soul to a devil? And, Melody says nothing. She keeps her head down. And Lord Minor puts a hand around her waist and kind of pulls her into his lap like she's some object to him, which she basically is. And he goes, Melody was left standing at the altar at her own wedding, and she made a deal with a contract devil to kill the guy that left her standing there and ran off with some bar wench on a boat somewhere. Well, it turns out a rather large kraken pulled their boat down while they were out in the middle of the ocean, and they were never seen or heard from again. So that young man and the harlot that he ran off got their comeuppance, but suddenly Melody owed her soul to a devil, and that was the deal. So I actually pulled some strings and recovered the contract, the devil's copy of that contract, and Melody has her own copy, of course, elsewhere. But if we were to get both of these contracts, we could shred them both and save her soul, Big Ben, and you would surely be rewarded for such a thing. And Big Ben's scratching his chin like, how did Lord Minor get a contract away from a contract devil? That's high-level magic. That's really bad juju. That's everything in between. And Lord Minor kind of swats Melody on the butt and goes, you should ask him. You should, beg for his help, etc., etc. And Melody looks up at him, and she has purple eyes as well. And there are very few creatures out there that have naturally occurring purple eyes. So Big Ben immediately understands that she is not human, but she's certainly got a chain around her neck, or a collar, rather. So until both copies of that contract come back to her, she is basically Lord Minor's bitch. So and he goes, why was the contract put there? And he said, in the staff of the jeweled cross. And he goes, well, we wanted to keep the devil's this contract devil's copy of the contract in a place that he couldn't go. And so the jeweled cross is always on holy ground. It's a blessed artifact. It would burn the demon's hands if he tried to pick it up, or it would burn his blood out of his body if he stepped onto holy ground. So we put it in the holiest place we could in the church, inside an artifact, etc., etc., behind all these barriers where he couldn't get it. And it's always been a secret. So if you were to recover that contract before it was destroyed, that would be great for dear Melody here. So if you would bring me the jeweled cross, we could get the contract out of it and destroy them both. And I'm sure Melody would reward you in the best ways that she could. And he kind of gestures that Melody's a fucking hot maid in a French outfit, that she'd basically hand herself over to Big Ben if he saves her immortal soul from this contract devil and recovers this holy artifact at the same time. And Big Ben's thinking this over. He's like, well, now that I know it's there, I'm going to have to go get it because it's a valuable artifact. The people of the town deserve to have it. And there's this contract here. And he's like, there's something wiggling around here that's bad. I should, recheck my my rules of Gunther, and he looks them over and he's like, I really don't see anything here. I mean, it's not a... And he goes, it's not a bribe, me doing this quest, is it? It's payment for services rendered, right? And he goes, yeah, I would call it that. And, Ben checks with Melody. He's like, you don't have to sleep with me because I get your contract back. I'm sure we'll figure something out when I get back. I'm supposed to save as many people as I can in the town or out of town, for I am a paladin of Gunther. Blah, 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 blah. So, Lord Minor sends Big Ben on his way, and Big Ben rejoins the party, and he's, of course, says, don't tell your other party members about this contract. Melody's, it is Melody's secret shame to know that other people, to spread this knowledge to other people that she made a deal with a contract devil. Don't be spreading this around to anybody, not even your closest allies. Once you've recovered the artifact, we can take it apart and get the contract and put it back together, and you can go display it somewhere. I don't care. And they go, okay. Or Big Ben goes, okay, so I have set several traps in Ben's way because I know Ben, out of the four of them, is pretty darn smart as far as like following rules, and he's been a monk before, he's been a paladin before, he's done several like rule-based classes where you have restrictions on your behavior, restrictions on your alignment, etc., etc. So he's being very careful. So I have to be a little more intricate with Big Ben if we're going to make him fall. So the technicality of this quest is going to be very interesting because, again, Big Ben is all about the monies, all about the rewards and buying the best magic items and stuff like that. So Ben rejoins his party, who have all recovered and had time to rest and go shopping and meditate and get their spells ready, the ones that have spells anymore. And they set out to go back to the church where supposedly this jeweled cross lays. And they get their papers stamped, and they're like level 4, level 5, level 6 by this point. They're starting to get up there in the paladin levels just since the adventure started. They've had a couple of recover some townspeople quests. They've had a couple of this area is jammed full of zombies. Go kill as many as you can with bow and arrow, or with run in and play the chunky salsa fights, etc., etc. So Big Ben is very happy that he's got a go fetch quest because whatever he's fetching is going to be very valuable. So the four of them go. Fast Ben, Big Ben, Sally, and Jessica all head down into the town again, beyond the barriers, and the captain's telling people, we're gonna blow the fuck out of the town and pour gasoline in the streets and shoot fire arrows onto the rooftops and do everything we can to obliterate this town from the face of the earth in like 3 days. So make sure everybody's back in those 3 days, and if you don't come back, then it's your own damn fault. Saint Gunther does not forgive, so the rules, and it's your own fault if you break them. So the rule is 3 days or you're gonna get blown up. So they've got a time limit for this. And they try to make a beeline for it, but of course there's zombies in the way. There's more dogs. There's plague rats running around in swarms, so they have to get up on a couple of the rooftops and throw alchemist fire down at them. And they decided to block off an intersection so that they could get through correctly. Like Big Ben and Fast Ben pushed a cart up in front of an alleyway and then tumped it over so that it would serve as a barrier so that zombies wouldn't come running the moment they started doing stuff. And they blocked off a bunch of alleyways so that it would just be like a straight shot down. And anything that came for them would either have to climb over all that stuff or would have to come straight at them, and they'd have plenty of time to shoot them in the head with bow and arrow or crossbow or whatever it happened to be. And they go all the way to the church, and there's still, like, again, 50, 60 dead zombie bodies laying there with arrows in their heads and stuff from where they had fought before. And they go, a lot of these missions end up at this church, huh? And I go, yeah, it's kind of like that. So they go in, it's completely decrepit, there's chewed up corpses everywhere. All the windows are busted out from the undead, breaking in and chewing everybody up. Because holy ground can stop evil things, but evil things that don't feel pain can get in a few steps and still chew on you. So, like I said, you can't really stab a zombie and stop it. It doesn't feel pain. So even if they burst into flames, as soon as they set foot on holy ground, they've still got X amount of health before they fall over and die. So if they bear hug somebody and chew their faces off, it doesn't take long. So they're on like high alert. Sally bought a bunch of intricate arrows, like fire arrows, freezing arrows, screaming arrows. I think she bought one death arrow as well, the +8 to hit and +8 damage arrows that are really hard to come by. She bought one of those, and thus far has been very good at keeping the fact that she doesn't have paladin powers a pretty good secret, because they've already got, holy swords and stuff. Oh, I have to backpedal. Gosh, when they went in, they had to leave their holy swords behind, because Ben ended up with a compass that would point to holy artifacts, and when they were going in, the compass would only ever point at their swords, because their swords were holy artifacts. They were holy blades or light blades or whatever you want to call them. They had to leave anything with a holy charge in it behind, so they had to go back to their regular steel, or regular cold iron or whatever it happened to be. The compass would wiggle and point at the nearest thing that contained holy magic that wasn't a person. So they had to go into town and use this compass to point to the nearest source of like divine magic. And Sally was very lucky that that the compass couldn't point at people, because it would point at her 3 allies and then not at her, but it was only for objects. So they went in, Big Ben with this compass, and they set foot in the church. And of course there's a bunch of zombies in there that are like either hiding or resting, or not resting, but crawling about on the corpses. So they spend a few rounds just to like shoot arrows and slice their heads off and kick them out of window frames and things like that to kind of clear out the main chapel area. And then they start going through the side rooms, the monk cells, the embalming rooms, the private herb courtyards, the monk gardens, the different things like that. Since this is the church of like a harvest god, they've got like a row of corn and a row of tomatoes and a row of this and a row of that to feed the people that work there as best they can. So the church basically has a private field behind it, which is, of course, still encased inside the town itself, but the greater portion of it is behind like 9 or 10 foot walls. So they have just enough to feed the guys that work there, plus trade, plus tithes that they receive, etc., etc., etc. And they check all the rows, and of course everything is wilted and dead, and or growing wild, because nobody's there to tend for it. And Ben goes, we probably need to go down into the catacombs. If the Hierophant was running from zombies, he may have taken refuge in one of the tunnels. And they go to like the big cellar doors, the ones that are like stone that have the tied rope on them. And they have to use all their strength to pull them open and go down into the darkness. And Sally lights a torch and holds it, and then I think it was Fast Ben had a light spell on him to make his shield glow, and they go in like weapons raised, because they know some bad stuff's going to happen. Because if the plague got down here, this is where people inter the dead, albeit behind stone. So even if they were alive, they might not, or if they came to life, they would still be behind stone slabs and things. So, however safe you want to make that. And they go down and they go through hallway after hallway, corridor after corridor, and there's no monsters down here. There's no traps. This is like I said, this is holy ground, or somewhat holy ground. It's a blessed place where not a lot of evil is going to get in. They don't put traps down because, it's a mausoleum, basically. It's an underground mausoleum where they inter the dead of the people that worked for the church or who did great deeds in the name of this harvest god. And they're like, Hierophant, are you down here? Is there anybody alive? That now kind of became the catchphrase of the whole campaign, is breaking into a location and going, is there anybody alive in here? Which would immediately alert everything evil, but would also alert anybody that was left alive. So stealth was not their forte as they were doing this. And they look into the side rooms and they check, the big sealed rooms that have like big slabs of stone that they have to push aside with all their might and use tools, and they had to pick up what was basically a ratchet and walk in a circle around this column to make this giant slab of stone move. And they go through layer after layer of this place and they go, gosh guys, I don't think he's here. And they're like, well, what do we do now? Where do we look? Where do we go? And they said, well, we've already been in the upper room of this church, and we've been through the chapel, and we've been through the monks' rooms and the fields. What does that leave? And they go, I don't know, the fucking broom closet? And and they go back up into the main building, and sure enough, they find the Hierophant dead, probably from starvation or injuries, in like a broom closet somewhere, in a little like supply closet that had like holy books and oils and candles and different stuff. Guy didn't have any food, but the place was crawling with zombies, so he couldn't get out. And clutched in his hands is this big golden, basically a staff with a cross on the top, the sacred cross of the harvest god. Now Big Ben knows he has to recover this with his party because he told them that part like he was supposed to, but he can't tell them about the contract that's inside the staff itself. That was the part that was supposed to be secret. And of course the compass goes wild when they wave it over this thing, because it's a powerful holy artifact, it was probably like blessing them with regular rain or blessing them with good luck or something like that. It was an area of effect, good spell of some kind. It had magic to it, but they weren't about to sit around and try to figure out what it was, because they're still in the middle of this zombie apocalypse. And Big Ben's like, all right, I put it in my bag, and we'll, I think he had a bag of holding, so just like the whole fucking thing just fit down there. And they turn around to go, and who is standing in the archway of the church, like not coming in but staring them down, but some kind of culty guy. And they stare at him, they're like, who the fuck's that? And he's got like blood red robes with golden stitches up and down it. He's got like rats crawling out from under him, and there's like crabs clutching onto like ocean crabs hanging onto his arms, and there's bugs crawling up and down his face, and he's staring at them from like under the lip of his hood like a fucking Sith Lord. And there's like stitches around the corners of his lips like the freaking Joker. He's like, the dude reeks of death. He's so pale and nasty looking. And I go, it's probably the guy you've been hearing about, the Stitcher. He is a plague lord. And they go, a plague lord? And I go, yeah, he commands rats, crabs, bugs, cockroaches, spiders, anything that can carry such diseases and illnesses. He can command them with the force of his own will, with his mind. And he's standing there in the archway, and is waiting for you guys to come outside. And they go, really? He's just kind of standing there by himself? And I go, yeah, he's just standing there. And Big Ben's like, I don't buy it. There's got to be something more to this. And like, we walk to the left and we walk to the right to make sure he doesn't have like stitched abominations waiting for us outside to see if it's just him. And I go, yeah, it looks like it's just him. You don't see anything else around the archway or behind him or in the yard or on the road or anything. He's just waiting for you to step off of holy ground so that he can get at you. And Sally looks over and is like, I bet he was waiting for somebody to go in there and get the sacred cross and to pull it off of holy ground so he could have it. And Jessica's like, why would he want the holy cross? You know, won't it hurt him if he grabs it because he's evil? And Big Ben's like keeping his mouth shut because he can't tell them about the contract. He doesn't know what Melody is. She's clearly not human, but the contract for her immortal soul is inside the staff, and he can't tell anybody about it because that was the deal. Because Lord Minor is whispering in his ear about untold rewards. And the Stitcher is here to take the sacred cross and the contract within, but he doesn't say anything. And they go, okay, well, he's not setting foot on holy ground, so he's clearly, undead, unholy, something. It's all the rats that are like crawling around, all the spiders and weird tarantula shit that's like coming off of his body as he stands there. None of them are crossing like the sacred threshold into the church itself. So the whole yard is getting filled with all this nastiness, and he's just waiting for them. And Fast Ben looks over. He's like, the longer we wait, the more like spiders and rats and nasty shit is going to gather here from this giant town. And I'd rather not set foot in that nastiness. And Sally, who is not immune to the plague anymore, nods in agreement like, yeah, we should kill him really quick. He's like, well, should we just like stand back and like shoot at him with our bows and arrows? He can't come into the church. And Big Ben's like, I'm no coward, and pulls his sword and pulls his shield and like, we'll do this hand to hand like men. Come on, Ben. And they charge in to fight this guy. And Ben like tries to just like fucking cut the guy in half. And the Plague Lord jumps back just in time to get like the front of his culty robes cut open, and like rats and spiders come flailing out in big swarms, and they're like, oh god, that was an awful mistake. And Sally's like standing inside the threshold. She's like, I've got alchemist fire, and she's just like dotting the field, trying to get rid of all the spiders and rats and other nasty nonsense that this guy is pulling onto the field. And it's like, okay, you burn a whole bunch of rats and a whole bunch of spiders, and you're dissipating the crowd of like plague beasts that this guy is pulling in, while Big Ben, Fast Ben, and Jessica are running forth to do battle. And Jessica's like, smiting attack, and swings and just blasts this guy for like 45, 50 damage. I had to roll on the instant death chart. I forget what supplement it's in, but it's like if you're a medium creature and you take more than 50 damage in a hit, you have to roll to stay alive, just from sudden catastrophic damage to yourself, to make sure he wasn't fucking cleaved in half. And he extends his arms and like he just like sprays them with spiders and rats and other nastiness, and one of his eyeballs comes out on a stalk and like turns around quickly so he can't be like snuck up on or flanked or anything. They're like, he sprayed us with fucking spiders. No, my worst nightmare. And there's plague rats crawling up their ankles, and Jessica is squealing, trying to like swing back and forth. She puts her sword away and pulls out like a mace instead to like cut swaths through the crowds of rats and spiders and other nastiness. And they fight, and they fight, and they fight. And Sally basically sets the whole yard on fire, throwing alchemist fire every which way. And finally, and Ben goes up. He's like, yes, I'm gonna freaking, smite per day. Boom. And hits him as hard as he can, rolls maximum damage. I don't remember what a paladin's smite per day at level 6 is. I don't remember if it's like 3d6 or 46, plus the weapon damage, plus strength, and he rolls it on a crit. And I was like, you know what, just double it, include the smite and double it, and it's like 68 damage or something outrageous like that. Just freaking flattens the guy. Just like from head to dick, he just falls in half, and there's like worms and gunk that just fly everywhere, and the cultist robe collapses, and Sally throws another alchemist fire on it to burn up whatever remains, and they stand there for a while to make sure like all the plague carrying stuff is dead or fleeing, and other things like that to make sure that this Stitcher is no more. And Big Ben looks over at Fast Ben and he's like, who was that guy? You know? And they stop and they look at each other like, was that just a boss battle we were getting ready to have that we heard about beforehand? He didn't say anything, but he was sure as hell ready for us to come out of the church with that sacred cross. And it goes, well, if he released a zombie plague for the sole purpose of getting to this sacred cross, it must be quite valuable. And they go, yeah, but what's so special about it? It's a holy artifact. He wouldn't be able to wield it. And again, Big Ben is staying hush-hush about Melody's contract. I don't remember if it was Melody or Valerie or something like that. I keep thinking it's something else, but I'm just going to say Melody this time, because they've been seeing that maid stand in the corner for the past 3, 4, 5 games, and this whole time she's been waiting for her contract to come back to her. So this plague lord destroyed this entire town. Big Ben knows to get to this contract, and now he is burning to know who and what this woman is, you know, because Lord Minor has access to both of her contracts, so he owns her. But if Big Ben brings one of her contracts back to her, then she's at least half in possession of herself, and she can work off her other one, if Lord Minor's philosophy is to be trusted, which, for better or for worse, it usually is, so who knows. Maybe she can work for 10 years and receive the other half, the other copy of this contract, and then destroy both, and, you know, she gets her immortal soul back. It's not on the wire for anything anymore. Though Big Ben does worry, how did Lord Minor get a contract away from a contract devil? It's not easy to do. And I was like, you're going to have to keep worrying about that, Ben. And we're saying this like off to one side when we're taking bathroom breaks. I'm like, you're going to just have to keep worrying about that until it happens, until something happens. And they're like, okay, we took out the Stitcher. We took out the originator of this plague. Gosh, now all we have to do is get out of Dodge so that all the paladins can blow this place up and eradicate the plague from this earth. And they're like, yeah. So they go. They've got the cross in Big Ben's bag, and they make down their straight on street like they came in through, and they sign out, and they give the okay. You know, hey, I don't think there's any paladins left in town. You know, we should be okay to start destroying the place whenever you guys want. We're gonna go rest. You know, we've recovered a holy artifact. We've got to bring it back. And the lieutenant that's staying there is like, oh, good job. You know, here's your pay, X amount of zombies, X amount of mission time, etc., etc. They get a big chunk of change. And Big Ben has the sacred cross, so it's going to be his responsibility on what happens to it. They kind of fan off for the day, and I go, okay, Ben, what are you going to do now that the mission's over? And he goes, well, I need to take the sacred cross up to Lord Minor and Melody to retrieve the contract, because I don't want to just break the damn thing in half. I could damage the paper or whatever's inside. It could be like that capsule from Da Vinci Code where it's like full of vinegar, and if you open it wrong, then it just destroys whatever's inside. But I think the rule we were going by was that the contract was only void if you could have both in the same place and then like stack them on top of each other and then rip them in half. And that was like the only proper way to do it. So, you know, that's neither here nor there, but that was like the motivation to get both of them. You couldn't just destroy one and then destroy the other. So, you know, it's the white sheet and the pink sheet and the yellow sheet you always get when you're signing a check. So you had to have all three of them together and then rip them up. So he's like, you know, Lord Minor, I have returned, you know, and I've got he pulls it out of his bag of holding. I've got the sacred cross of the harvest god, just, you know, right pretty much where you said it would be. You know, thank you for telling us about this. You know, if we could have blown up the whole town and destroyed it in the process. And of course, Melody is more at attention now, though she's not like stepping out of the corner just yet. She's still pretty much Lord Minor's bitch. And Big Ben is looking over his St. Gunther rules, which again I've lost. I don't know where I put them. And he's like, well, Melody is in need of help, and I have to help those who truly need help. That is one of the sacred commandments of St. Gunther, or Lord Gunther, or whatever it happens to be, because I'm Ben and I don't remember. And Lord Minor kind of stands up, and he's got like his leather not riding gloves, but like fancy lord's gloves on, and he takes the cross and the shaft and he starts unscrewing it, and he sets the cross aside, and he like shakes it so that the contract will come out, and sure enough, a big piece of yellowed paper like slowly drifts out like an old like crunched up leaf, and they unroll it, and it's like 3 feet long, and the writing is super tiny, and it's got a long complicated name written at the bottom, and then the contract devil's signature, which is of course in written in infernal, so nobody can read it, because to know the true name of a demon and blah blah. But the name at the bottom doesn't say Melody. It says a long and complicated name that is not Melody. And Big Ben's like, what is this? And he goes, and Lord Minor goes, well, that's Melody's full name. And Ben looks at it and is like, this doesn't say Melody anywhere in the name. This is Melody like a nickname? And I can't for the life of me remember Melody's full name, but it didn't take much for Ben to realize that the name was in Draconic. That Melody, you know, purple-eyed that she was not human, nor elven, nor anything in between. She was a dragon in disguise. And she had sold her soul, again, after being left on the altar. She tried to marry, I think, an elven man or something similar to that. Since dragons can polymorph into anything, she would have outlived him by a lot. But he left her at the altar for another elven woman who wanted his hand, and she sold her soul so that to make sure he would die a horrible, horrible death at sea, and he did. And this contract, amongst all the bylines and stuff, promised her immortal soul to whoever held both contracts. Now, Lord Minor has one, and Big Ben has the other. So now, Melody has to follow their orders so long as they hold the contract. And he looks over and he goes, you know, Melody, we can tear these up now and you can go free. And Lord Minor's like, the hell she is. She's, you know, she's a servant, but she's still a dragon, Big Ben. You don't get it, do you? You can't hand these over to her and just instantly free her. This has to be done delicately in a place that's not my mansion, etc., etc., because if she becomes free and then decides she wants to eat my face, I mean, do you have any idea how many times I've fucked her in the ass? The first thing she's going to do is turn around and chew me in half. And Ben kind of stares at him and goes, well, whose fault is that? And he rolls up the contract, and he reaches over and he's like, I stuff it between her boobs. She can have it. And Melody is, of course, delighted that now she, half of what she does is under her power. And she throws her arms around him. She doesn't say anything. She must be like a mute dragon, or I must have not known what to make her say. Because I don't think she ever said anything. But she throws her arms around Ben, and they embrace. He's so selfless, so wonderful as a paladin of Gunther. And Lord Minor's like, fine, I'll have to make sure the other contract disappears out of her reach. He's like, I was just going to hide it somewhere else, but now that she's in possession of it, it would be stealing if I took it, so it would be void and blah-de-blah-de-blah. I've read through this contract so many times. I had to pull quite a few strings to get both copies, even on the same material plane, and now she's got one of them. Thanks for nothing. And Big Ben's like, I'm sorry, this actually backfired you, nanner. He thinks he's gotten away with it. So Big Ben grabs the sacred cross, and he grabs the shaft of the staff, and he screws them back together, and he's standing there holding it, feeling like a pretty tough badass. He's like, come, Melody, we'll go return this, or we'll go see what we can get for this sacred cross of the harvest god. And she nods and puts a little arm around him, and he wonders, what kind of dragon is she? I mean, is she chromatic? Is she metallic? What alignment is she? He's wondering, but her immortal soul hung in the balance, so he thought he was doing the right thing, which he basically was. So, and Lord Minor just kind of sits there at his desk, just kind of seething, wondering what he should do next, because his servant is half not his now. And how do you measure that? Can she just say no every other time he orders her to do something? I don't know. I didn't think of the implications there. But should she find the other contract ever, the first thing she's going to do is chew him in half. So, what do I know? I'm not a lawyer. So, Big Ben, this unfortunately was where Big Ben solved everything and then shot himself in the foot, or rather tripped at the finish line. And again, this is between games, so his other party members were not there to argue him down, but that's really the only way these things go, because it has to be Big Ben's decision to see if he would pass or fail his round of temptation. He did not. Big Ben comes out of Lord Minor's mansion, like holding the staff to one side, and he's got Melody in the other arm, feeling like, the knight in shining armor that he knows he is. And they go out into the courtyard, and, the kids are playing hopscotch over here, and there's people tented over there, and they're cooking stew and places. Lord Minor's courtyard is full of people. And when he steps out there, people look up and they point, and, none of the clerics and priests of this town survived. So when he comes out sporting the holiest artifact from this entire town, people pay attention. And like, look, that paladin of St. Gunther has the sacred cross of the harvest god. Ooh, and they all gather around to see what he's got to say, and he's got this scantily clad maid on his other arm. And he's like, yes, I've recovered this artifact. Who should I turn it into for my reward? And that was where he tripped. And I was like, ah, damn, you were so close. You could have just handed it off to them. And they're like, reward? Our whole town, look down there. And they're already starting to spread gasoline and light the, or oil rather, and light the roofs on fire and stuff. It's like, all of our belongings are down there. And Ben got a little indignant, and he should not have. He said, well, I've killed X number of zombies today, and I fought a plague lord, and I had spiders all up in it, and he pulled his pants legs. I look at all these freaking bites I've got all over me. I deserve some reward for bringing back the greatest and holiest artifact, not even an artifact of my church. Does no one here have have some reward for me? Come on. And Melody is kind of like pinching her nose and looking to one side like, oh God, this is so embarrassing. And the townspeople like look among themselves and they're like, and they're like, okay, we'll be right back. And they all like disperse as a crowd. And they look in their tents and their, pots and their bags and knapsacks and purses, trying to find anything that might be of value to get this, holy paladin of Gunther to hand over the town's holy artifact, so that their fields can continue to prosper. He's basically ransoming it. He picked it up, it doesn't belong to him, and he demanded money in return to give it back to them. It's like if somebody lost their cell phone and you picked it up and then you called the first number on it, you're like, yeah, I'll give you your phone back for $50. That's ransom. that's a form of stealing, first of all, and demanding money in return, that's double, to return it, that's double stealing, because you took something, kept it, and demanded money in return to give it back. And I was like, damn it, Ben, you were so close. So amongst the 280 of them, they manage about 1,100 gold, just from whatever was in their purses and their pockets, etc., etc. And it's like, oh, 1,100 gold? Well, I guess that's all they have to give. Dang it. Because that's Ben's line of thinking, is gathering up as much money as he can to buy all the cool magic items. And he knows, as a paladin of Gunther, he's not going to be wielding the sacred cross of another church. He's not stupid. But in the meantime, he didn't want to just give the cross back. He demanded a monetary reward. And I was like, that's basically ransom, right? That cross belonged to the town, and you took it from its resting place, albeit in a broom closet, in a church on holy ground, brought it to them, and then refused to give it to them until they paid you. That's not very paladin-like, Big Ben. Well, it was a quest, and quests gotta have quest rewards. That was basically his very basic line of thinking. He's like, I'm sure it'll be fine. In fact, I'll give, 10% of it goes to the Tith anyway. I'll give half of it to Melody, so she's got some spending money after all of this. And I'll end up with a paltry 450 gold, or whatever it happened to be. And I was like, all right. And I go, in the meantime, Melody is so grateful that you got her contract back from the church that she gestures that you guys go walking in the gardens together behind Lord Minor's mansion. And Big Ben's like, yes, I might get some out of this. And he's thinking of all his acolytes, like, I don't think I've ever fucked a dragon before. Maybe this will happen. Yes. And Big Ben goes, well, yeah, sure, I'll go with her. I've never been on like a romantic walk or a private walk with a dragon, so I'll definitely go with her. And they go, evening is passing by now, and the moon is on the rise. And Melody takes him not really into a hedge maze, but into like the hedges, where there's apple trees, there's, the gardeners are all gone for the day, the horses are fed, there's nobody back there. And I go, Melody wants to know, in so many gestures, I suppose, if you will steal the other half of her contract for her and save her immortal soul. And Ben stops for a second and he goes, wait. if I steal the contract from Lord Minor, wouldn't that be stealing, you know? I know, if I steal that, would that be stealing? But that would be stealing, and I would lose my paladin powers. But at the same time, she needs my help, and she is truly in need of help. And he goes, that's not fair, T. You wrote me into a corner. I can't do one and not the other. Or if I do one, I'm damned if I do, damned if I don't. You can't do that with Gunther's rules. And I go, well, if you look at his rules, they do conflict quite a bit. Like if suffer not the fallen meets always accept surrenderers. If a fallen paladin approached you and threw down their sword, would you still kill them? You might lose your powers. And Ben's like, oh, damn, you wrote him that way on purpose, didn't you? To come up with this moral compass bullshit. And I said, well, Ben, you really don't have to worry about losing your powers. And he goes, what? What do you mean? I said, you've already lost your powers. What? And it just blows his mind. And he goes, when? When did that happen? And I goes, when you ransomed back that sacred artifact to those peasants, that's stealing. And he goes, that's not stealing. And we had like a 2-hour argument, I swear, on the philosophy of ownership. And he goes, well, if I go into a dungeon and open a chest and take everything out, is that stealing? And I go, well, number one, there haven't been any chests in this campaign. I've been very careful about that. And number two, no, probably not. Because if these people saw you had something of theirs and you demanded money to give it back to them, that's ransom, which is a form of stealing. So, and he's like, oh, god damn it, I tripped at the finish line, didn't I? That whole quest was to see if I would, sell it off or try to bribe Melody for money or something, wasn't it? And I go, yeah. If you'd just been a good paladin and handed over the most sacred artifact in the town, just done it for free, you would have been in the clear, but no, you had to get money for it. And I go, ransom. It's stealing. And he goes, oh, god damn it. So, Big Ben, through technicality, through his own hubris and greed for the gold the gold in his purse, fell from grace and became a fallen paladin. And I said, remember, Big Ben, suffer not the fallen. If any of your party members find out that you have lost your paladin powers, you will be on the chopping block. They are obligated to kill you, and if they don't, they lose their powers as well. And he's like, you wrote these 10 rules as a fucking dichotomy, didn't you? And I wish I could remember where I fucking put the 10 rules, because every time I need them, they seem to go missing. But yeah, always accept surrenders and suffer not the fallen were no good. Do not steal, and make sure you help out people that need it was another one. Those two can go against each other. And I said, yeah, these 10 rules are set up in such a way that you have to make the moral choice. And when they cross each other, you're probably already in a corner anyway. So, and I said, well, in the meantime, Mr. Fallen Paladin, you've still got your Holy Blade that is enchanted thus, so you can at least you can fake it for a while, because it's got a Holy Blast on it, which I think had 9 charges in it for an extra D10 against anything that's evil, and those had 15 charges in them to last the whole campaign. And again, all the paladins came, so they brought all their toys, so even the low-ranked people get cool stuff. That Holy Blade could explode for holy damage, so he could just say, Divine Smite, I use up a charge, and just fake it. He's like, oh, god damn it, what do I take levels in from now on then? Fighter? Knight? And I said, whatever you want, it can't be Paladin, because you ransomed off a holy artifact to a bunch of people You not ought to have. And I go, it wasn't yours, and you sold it to the people whom it belonged to. And I know I'm talking in circles, but I was just so proud of myself that I set up such a simple trap for Big Ben's failure, and he tripped at the finish line. And he goes, well, what about Melody? And I go, what? And I go, well, Melody asked me to steal the other half of her contract, so how are we gonna do that? I mean, I would have to go on a solo mission, right? Because if I go and bring my 3 party members with me, they're stealing also, so they would all lose their powers, and then we'd all be on the chopping block. And I go, yeah, you're right. That is, of course, if you agree to steal it. You could try to buy it off him. You could try for a form or favor in return for the contract itself to get the other half of Melody's soul back. And he goes, Lord Minor has all the money in the world. What could I possibly offer him? What does he like more than anything? And I go, he likes having control of other people. And he goes, I don't think he swings that way. And I was like, shut up. And I go, well, the best you can do is ask, and the worst he can say is no. And he goes, fine. Well, what does Melody promise me? I may as well, because I've already fallen and lost my powers. What is Melody going to give me if I get her the second contract so that she can be free? And he goes, Melody, what do you got? I mean, you're a maid. You're a servant. You're in service to Lord Minor. I'm guessing you don't have a lot of stuff to your name. And Melody gets down on her knees and starts to undo his fly. And he goes, oh, well, that's one way of doing that. And standing there in the moonlight, Ben leans against a tree and gets a blowjob from a dragon in human form. And Ben says, I kind of like clutch at her hair and look up at at Lord Minor's mansion and just kind of try to puzzle over this. And I was like, sure, if you say you can do a lot of thinking while you're getting oral sex, try for it. And he's like, what do I roll for that? And I was like, shut up. And I go, well, you can try and steal it. You can try and offer him something for it. You can see if you can't get someone else to steal it. He's like, a hired sword? And he's like, yeah, if you've got the money for that kind of thing. But you would have to know where the contract is, and he's probably got it hidden somewhere, deep in the manor or in a safe or something like that. It would be hard to divine its location, much less obtain it without being discovered. Because if you steal it and you get caught, then all the other paladins are going to think that you're stealing. Oh, you have lost your powers. Cast Cure Light Wounds or something. And when he can't, because he ransomed a holy artifact, they're going to know he's fallen and chop his fucking head off. So he's like, God, this is quite, the conundrum. I can't really think much. And he looks down and like watches this woman's head bob between his legs. And he's like, God, this is hard. This is hard. And I'm like, shut up. And I was like, well, you could just turn her down. And he goes, could I? And he thinks about it for a while. He's like, well, I'm already a fallen paladin, but I really don't see how I'm going to do this on my own. And I can't risk my friends. And he thinks about this for a while. And I said, she's coming up on finishing. And he goes, all right, I take a fistful of her hair and I plunge myself into her mouth until I am balls deep, and I make her swallow. And I go, okay. And I go, she leans back with your seed dripping down one side of her mouth, looking up at you with hope in her eyes. And Big Ben kind of slowly shakes his head and goes, no. He goes, no, I can't do it. And Melody, flushed in the face, his semen dripping down the side of her mouth. She kind of looks to one side, humiliated, completely humiliated. She begged for his help. She sucked him off. She did everything that she thought she could do. She doesn't have money or prestige or anything to offer him. And, he turned her down. He said, I am a fallen paladin. I can't without risking my friends or myself with no clues, with no nothing. I cannot. And Melody slowly gets up and she wipes her mouth and she rather unladylike spits to one side and she redoes her shirt and she folds her hands in front of her waist. She still says nothing. And she slowly bows to thank him for recovering at least her half of the contract. And leaves him there in Lord Minor's backyard in the moonlight, cock hanging out, dripping with semen. And she slowly walks back inside with her head bowed low. And Ben goes, God damn it, don't I feel like a fucking piece of trash? And I go, yeah, you probably do. Good luck hiding this from your friends, by the way. Your new fallen status. And that was where we stopped for that session. So I hope you enjoyed that particular episode of D&D Stories. Keep gaming.
Hi guys, T here. Remember to hit that like button for me on your way out. If you'd like to see artwork and maps from my gaming table, check out the D&D Stories Facebook page. Also, I have a Patreon if you'd like to toss a few gold pieces into your humble bard's hat. Links in the description below. Keep gaming!